Welcome to the latest episode of Gryphon Manor. Now, in the last episode, I built a temporary shaft from the surface of the estate down to bedrock, and then I set up entrances to each of the planned underground levels, and finally I wrapped all of that up in what will be the permanent elevator shaft. Now, once I get some quartz from the Nether, I'll be able to replace the temporary shaft with a proper elevator, and I think it'll be an uplifting experience. And that brings us to what this episode's all about. It's time to lace up my walking shoes again, but this time I'm jumping to a whole new dimension, the Nether. Now, as you probably know, the Nether was designed to be distinctly hell-like, literally hell-like, with a twisted and broken landscape filled with likewise twisted and broken lost souls, and an environment where you can easily burn to death if you're not careful. It's a lot like Las Vegas in the summer. Once I arrive there, the goal will be to establish a foothold that will look very similar to what I just finished in the overworld. But instead of otters and chickens getting in my way, it'll be piglins, zombified piglins, endermen, and a ghast or two, and they will undoubtedly try to do more than just get in my way. As I dig out and build the shaft, I should find a fair bit of quartz, and with that, I should be able to build proper elevators in the overworld and the Nether. And quartz is a key material in many create mod contraptions, so I can then move forward with building a proper workshop, automated farms, and basically all the working bits of a fully functional base. To accomplish that, I have a few goals. From the overworld, I'll need to create, insert air quotes here, a gate room for the Nether portal. Though I use the term gate room, again with the air quotes, it's strictly in the most generic sense, and in no way implies any direct or indirect relationship between this world and a few television series in which Richard Dean Anderson acted and produced. Now, rules and restrictions apply. See your local dealer for details. Void where taxed or prohibited. No purchase necessary. Cash value 1/20th of a cent. After that, it'll be time to build the Nether portal itself and activate it. Without this key step, this would be a very short episode. Once through the portal, I'll need to establish a sheltered space that will act as my initial foothold in the Nether, but I think I'll hold off meeting the neighbors for a bit. From the protection of the foothold, I will reach bedrock at the Nether origin, and then I will start digging and building the primary access shaft from the lower bedrock layer to the upper bedrock layer. I don't plan to fully duplicate all the functionality of the Manor base in the Nether, but there are some advantages to having some functional facilities in the Nether. So the shaft will have access points to multiple levels, just as it already does in the overworld. Though in this case, at least some of those access points will also open up to the outside, while most of the access points in the overworld will open up only to the underground levels of my base. Then I will build the permanent shaft or shell for the elevator, and in doing that I will establish the basic visual theme and materials for my facilities in the Nether. Now, I've been pouring through volumes of Good Housekeeping and watching videos on Martha Stewart's channel for ideas and color swatches, so prepare to be fashionably amazed here. Many moons ago, the Nether was still a hellish landscaping nightmare, but it did sort of resemble the overworld in that most of it was filled with a definite underground, a definite quote-unquote surface, and a lot of quote-unquote sky, which ultimately ended at a layer of netherrack directly below the topmost level of bedrock. And back in those days, my building in the Nether closely resembled what I was doing in the overworld. Of course, the folks at Mojang have been making changes in Nether over the years, and one of those changes was to redefine the character of the Nether. It became more like the Caves and Cliffs update, where large open spaces were more rare and less open, and the idea of the main surface level was replaced with multiple spaces distributed across the entire vertical range of the dimension. As a result, the Nether looked and felt more alien, more interesting, and it was definitely a hell of a lot harder to move around. And yes, the pun was intended, for the most part. My old designs wouldn't work in that space, or at least they wouldn't be very practical for that kind of environment. And that was when I decided to stick with the vertical shaft model I've been using in my bases. But to extend it from the bedrock layer at the bottom to the bedrock layer at the top, and invariably it would pass through several different layers, and I could, and did, build access points at each of these that would allow me to easily and relatively safely traverse the various levels of the Nether. And that's exactly what I'll do here as well. Now, one does not just simply walk into the Nether. Well, actually one kind of does, but only after one builds a Nether portal. There's no trick to that unless you don't have access to diamonds, in which case it's pretty complicated, but I'll save that for another time. However, with diamonds, one can make a diamond pickaxe and then go harvesting obsidian. And if no obsidian can be found, then one can go take a bucket of water to a convenient lava source and create your own obsidian. With the obsidian blocks in hand, you just need to use them to create a rectangle of the appropriate size. Now, it is possible to make a portal that's too small or too big to activate. And for more details on that, check out the Minecraft wiki. I will put a link to the right page in the episode notes. But once the portal's built, use a flint and steel on it and voila, you'll have a working nether portal. However, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you're probably well aware that, for me at least, there's always more to it than that, and this time is no exception. I can't just throw up a portal and go bursting through. My portal is intended to be a key and permanent fixture within my overall transportation system, so the planned gate room will be located within the concourse level of my metro system, and it will be housed in a proper space. But with all that out of the way, it's time to step through. And this isn't too bad. Half the time I appear in a new nether instance, I am being attacked even before I fully materialize out of the portal. So this is nice, but the relative peace is undoubtedly short-lived, so I need to enclose the space to keep those twisted, broken souls out of my way, or at least to keep me out of their reach. The next order of business is to tunnel down to bedrock and then tunnel over to the origin point for this dimension. Now, tunneling down and over is generally lower risk than trying to do anything on the surface. Now, this is because the available space is likely to be just whatever I happen to open up with my pickaxe, and if that's well lit, then there's virtually no chance of running into bad guys. Lava is, of course, always a possibility in the Nether, but when tunneling just above the bottom bedrock layer, I should be comfortably far below any lava sea, and so the whole effort's about as safe as you can reasonably expect in the Nether. From the origin, it's time to start building the access shaft. Now, since I'm already at the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up, literally. And so that's what I'll do. The goal here is to build the initial access shaft, which is just a tube of stone brick blocks with a column of scaffolding running up through the middle of it. And I could start with the scaffolding instead of ladders, as I'm already at the bottom. Except for where I break out into open spaces and am therefore vulnerable to the locals, this part should go pretty quickly unless I run into something unexpected. And this is definitely unexpected. After going out of my way and telling you in excruciating detail about how there is no real surface level in the Nether, I have tunneled up to what is apparently the surface level in this instance of the Nether. And in my defense, this may be because I'm running the Ascendium mod, which brings a whole bunch of changes to the Nether, and so this could very well be a result of that. After the initial surprise of finding the non-existent surface of the Nether, I added a couple more levels to the shaft, and then I realized that there's really no point in building the shaft all the way up to the roof of the Nether, as there really is nowhere that I would need to open access to except maybe the netherrack at the very top of the dimension. So where do I go from here? I think it's time to go retro, and making that statement in a steampunk-ish world is ironic, and I get that. But what I'm saying is that I should probably go return to my roots and build a surface installation similar to what I'm doing in the overworld. Probably a fort of some kind. Considering the general era and the flavor of my world, I'm thinking that the fort at the surface would look similar to one of the fortresses on the Maginot Line in France. Now, if you have no idea what this is, you should probably look it up. It's a very interesting footnote in history. However, for those of you more likely to watch the movie than read the book, it was a line of fortifications built by France in the years between World War I and World War II to prevent the German military from doing what it eventually did anyway. However, in my case, there's a lot that I can use for inspiration for my fort in the Nether, but I can't keep just referring to it as my fort in the Nether. Therefore, I will name it Fort Discovery, after the RRS Discovery, which was the ship that carried Sir Robert Falcon Scott on his polar expeditions. And while the Nether is certainly not cold, it's just as hostile and deadly as any polar climate, and so I think it's fitting tribute to use here. And it also meshes well into my whole Victorian Edwardian steampunkish motif. At this point, I really wish I had proper artillery and air defenses, but instead I will just have to settle for something more practical based on what I have access to, which in this case is bows and small arms. Now, I would insert a T-Rex joke in here, but trying to find one that fit was a bit of a reach. Anyway, the outer layers of the fort will be a layered stack of pillboxes and fortified firing positions, which are progressively smaller as the structure rises from the surface. In short, the finished fort might resemble a fortified stone wedding cake, or even a pyramid of death, which would, as Dave Barry might say, be a great name for a rock band. So let me see if I met my goals. I did set up a gate room and a wall or module template in the overworld, and I set up a portal to the Nether. I also did that for the portal back to the overworld, so check. I established a foothold in the Nether, and from there I dug out the primary access shaft from the bedrock, at least from the lower bedrock layer. As previously discussed, I did not shoot for the roof, so I think this is covered, so check and check. I set up the entrances for each of the levels, and I built a shell or casing for the elevator shaft, and in so doing, I established a cosmetic theme of fort discovery. So check, check, and check. On balance, this one turned out to be easier than I expected, since I didn't have to build all the way up to the upper bedrock layer. On the other hand, I now have a whole new project to work through, but I am excited about the prospects. However, I now have quite a bit of quartz and iron stockpile, so I have pretty much all I need to install elevators via the Create mod, and so that is the next step, and I'm looking forward to it. And so, with all of that said, I hope this finds you and yours in good health, good spirits, and a touch of good fortune. Take care of yourselves out there. Cheers.